Humans called them special forces. The galaxy was already terrified of their regular troops. My name is Velkarith, and I was the most respected intelligence analyst in the Dominion for 32 years. I was never wrong. That was not arrogance. It was a record. 32 years, 49 conflict assessments, not a single strategic miscalculation. The High Council trusted me above any other analyst alive. I want you to understand that before I tell you how badly I failed. The moment the first report landed on my console about a species called humans, I did what I always do. I read everything. I cross-referenced every data point. I built a picture from the fragments. Their homeworld was a mid-sized rock with violent weather. Their biology was embarrassingly fragile, no natural armor, low-light vision, a lifespan so short it bordered on tragic. They had spent most of their recorded history fighting each other, which I logged as a mark against their intelligence rather than a warning sign about their nature. They had reached the stars barely 2 centuries ago. The Dominion had been among the stars for 4,000 years. My assessment was clean and confident. Manageable. The first indication that I had missed something came at 17 minutes past the third watch cycle when the Dominion battle group designated Spear Formation entered the Kepler's reach system. I was watching the feed from a relay station positioned 9 light minutes away. Commander Harvlin had 40 warships on his authority. The human presence in that system consisted of 1 frigate, 2 orbital defense platforms, and a colony of about 12,000 civilians. Harvlin broadcast a formal demand for surrender. It was standard procedure. Most species, when faced with 40 warships, begin negotiating within minutes. It is rational. There is no honor in destruction for its own sake. Even the most stubborn species in our records had accepted terms when they mathematics were this clear. The human frigate did not respond to the demand. For 4 minutes there was silence. Then the frigate moved. Not away. Not sideways. Directly at the formation. I leaned closer to my console. I genuinely thought there had been a navigation malfunction. No rational commander would charge 40 warships with 1 frigate. The probability of survival was effectively 0. Harvland must have thought the same thing because his formation held its position. Perhaps he believed it was a bluff. Perhaps he was simply too surprised to react quickly enough. The frigate came in at full speed, broadcasting on every open frequency. I had the translation within seconds. The voice was female, steady almost. Come. Her name, she said, was Sergeant Major Danny Voss. She was not speaking to the Dominion fleet. She was speaking to the colony below. Kepler's reach defense, she said. This is Sergeant Major Danny Voss aboard the frigate Caraway. We are drawing fire. Hold your positions. Evacuation support is 12 minutes out. 12 minutes. Hold the line. The frigate drew fire. That is the only accurate way to describe what happened next. She flew her ship into the edge of the formation, forced Harvland to split his attention and his targeting systems. Absorbed damage that should have ended the engagement in seconds and kept moving. The ship was coming apart around her crew. The whole readings on my display were catastrophic, and she kept broadcasting. Not distress signals. Status updates. Calm, professional, numbered status. Updates as if she were filing a maintenance report rather than guiding a dying ship through the middle of an enemy fleet. 8 minutes in, a single dropship broke atmosphere from the surface. It was broadcasting a human emergency frequency so aggressively that it overloaded 3 of our listening arrays. It climbed directly through the debris of the engagement, took fire from 2 of our smaller ships, and landed in the colony central plaza with smoke coming from its port engine. The dropship began loading civilians. Harvalin destroyed the caraway at the 11-minute mark. The frigate came apart quietly with no dramatic explosion, just a slow break along the spine and then nothing. I noted in my log that the crew had continued broadcasting until the moment the ship lost power. I noted it, then moved on because at the time I thought it was simply a remarkable act of individual courage, rather than a data point about an entire species. The colony fell. Harvalin secured Kepler's reach within the hour, but something had been activated during those 11 minutes. A deep space beacon broadcasting on a frequency we had not flagged as military. By the time our signals team identified it, it had been transmitting for 9 minutes. Someone had been warned. A plan had been set in motion that I had not anticipated because I had not known to look for it. I flagged this in my report. I noted the efficiency of the human response despite the loss. I noted that the frigate crew had almost certainly known from the first moment that they would not survive the engagement and that they had proceeded anyway, and that I was uncertain how to model this in my predictive frameworks. I ended that particular section with a sentence I almost deleted because it seemed melodramatic. I left it in because it was accurate. I wrote, "These people do not fight to survive. They fight for each other." 3 days later, an intercepted communication came across my desk. It was a human military transmission, flagged as priority level 1, routed through their upper command structure to their forward elements. I had the translation team process it immediately. It read, "Priority Alpha. Kepler's reach has fallen. Contingency hammer is now active. Forward elements are authorized and en route. Note all current deployments are regular Army assets only. Special Operations Forces are not authorized at this time." I read it 3 times. I filed it under ongoing monitoring. I noted the phrase "Special Operations" with a small question mark in my personal log, then moved on to other matters. I thought nothing of it. That was my second mistake. The first was underestimating their regular army. The second, far more consequential one, was treating that footnote as a footnote. I did not yet understand that when humans say their special forces are not authorized at this time, they do not mean those forces are unavailable. They mean they are being saved. They mean the situation has not yet become serious enough to justify using them. They mean there is an entire category of human capability that functions as a final answer held in reserve for the moment when all other answers have been tried and found insufficient. At the time of Kepler's reach, I thought I understood what humans were capable of. I had not seen anything yet. The Dominion High Council gave me a new assignment 2 weeks after Kepler's reach. They wanted me forward, embedded with the advance elements. observing, advising, reporting in real time. It was presented as an honor. I accepted because I was still confident, and confidence has a way of making invitations feel like opportunities rather than the things they sometimes actually are. The transport that carried me to the front was clean and fast, and the officer who met me at the forward command post was a senior strategist named Harvey Lynn, the same commander who had taken Kepler's reach. He was pleased with himself in the that commanders are pleased when they have won a quick and easy engagement. He poured me something warm to drink and told me that the humans would fold in 3 months. I did not disagree with him. I should have. The push into human space moved quickly. At first, the Dominion fleet was 4,000 years more advanced in propulsion and long-range targeting. We held the void between star systems without much contest. Human ships were faster than expected and more maneuverable than our models predicted, but they were outgunned in every direct engagement. They did not try to win those engagements. They ran, they delayed, they extracted their people, and they fell back to prepared positions on the ground. This should have told me something. It told Harvey Lynn nothing. The first ground engagement I personally observed was at a place the humans called Tharsis Ridge. It was a supply depot, heavily stocked, positioned on a high plateau with clear sightlines in 3 directions. Tactically, it was well chosen. The Dominion sent a ground force of roughly 1,200 soldiers to take it. The human garrison holding it numbered around 300. Standard doctrine for any rational species: when outnumbered 4 to 1. With no incoming relief, you negotiate. You preserve your people. You fight another day in better circumstances. The humans at Tharsis Ridge did not do this. What happened over the next 68 hours changed how I saw this entire conflict. Our forces hit them from the east slope at first light. The exchange lasted 40 minutes before our advance stalled. Not because the humans pushed us back. They didn't have the numbers, but because every time we thought a section of their line was collapsing, it wasn't. Soldiers who should have been out of the fight were still fighting. Our medical advisors, watching the engagement feeds, noted that the human pain response appeared to be suppressed. Under combat conditions, they hypothesized a biochemical mechanism. I sat beside them watching the same feeds and wrote something different in my own notes. I wrote, it is not suppressed. They are aware of the pain. They are choosing to continue anyway. There is a distinction, and it matters enormously. On the second day, our forces took out one of their armored vehicles with a direct hit from a heavy ground cannon. I watched the crew come out through the emergency hatch, 3 of them. The first one out was moving normally. The second one was moving slowly, clearly hurt. The third was not moving at all. The first soldier dragged the third out by the arm, got him to cover behind a broken section of perimeter wall, checked him over, and then, without pausing, stood up and rejoined the fight on foot with a weapon pulled from the wreckage. He had just lost his vehicle. His crewmate was seriously hurt. He had no armor and no cover. And he went back. Harvilan, watching from beside me, said, they are irrational. It is a weakness we can exploit. I said nothing, but I was thinking, it is not a weakness. I do not know what it is, but it is not a weakness. The humans held Tharsis Ridge for 68 hours. They lost nearly half their number. When the relief convoy finally broke through from the western approach, the surviving soldiers did not celebrate. I watched them carefully because I wanted to understand. They checked on each other. They inventoried what they had left. Then their senior officer, a man named Corporal Andrew Holt, who had somehow become the ranking soldier because everyone above him was gone, pulled up a map and immediately began asking the relief commander which objectives were next. They had just survived something that should not have been survivable, and they were already looking forward. I arranged through Harvaland's cooperation to speak with the prisoner. She was a human soldier named Carla Weiss, a private captured when a flanking unit had cut off 3 fighters near the ridge's eastern approach. She had a bandaged arm and a calm expression, and she answered my questions with the patience of someone who had already decided how she felt about her situation. I asked her why the garrison had not accepted terms. She looked at me like I had asked her why water was wet. Because the people in the depot needed time to move the supplies, she said. We bought them the time. That's the job. I asked her if she had been afraid. She thought about it for a moment. Yes, she said. I asked her how she continued despite that. She was quiet for a few seconds. Then she said, because the person next to me was afraid too, and I wasn't going to leave them alone. In that, I wrote it down word for word. I have read it many times since. It is still the most precise explanation of human military psychology I have ever encountered. They do not fight because they are not afraid. They fight because they will not let their fear be more important than the person beside them. This is not a trained behavior. It is a cultural default. They arrive at the battlefield already equipped with it. My report to the council was longer this time, more detailed, more urgent. I included the Tharsis Ridge numbers, the human loss rate, the hours held, the ratio of our casualties to theirs. I explained what I was beginning to understand about how their military culture functioned and why our standard pressure tactics were not producing the expected results. I included once again a note about the phrase special operations from the intercepted communication. I wrote, we have been engaging their standard forces for 6 weeks. In that time, we have seen capabilities that exceed every model I built. I am now formally requesting that we investigate what they mean by special operations before we advance further. If their regular soldiers behave this way, I do not know what to expect from the ones they consider exceptional. The council sent back a short acknowledgement. They noted my report had been received. They ordered the advance to continue toward the human core systems. They had by this point begun to enjoy the progress on the map. Maps are very clean. They do not show you the look in Carla Weiss's eyes. They do not show you Andrew Holt checking his next objective before the last one had even cooled. They do not show you what a 68-hour defense against overwhelming odds looks like from the inside. The council was watching a map. I was watching something else entirely. And what I was watching was beginning to frighten me in a way that 32 years of intelligence work had never managed. We were not fighting soldiers who were brave under pressure. We were fighting soldiers for whom bravery was simply the starting point, a baseline, A given. They built everything else on top of it. We had not yet seen what they had built. It began with a convoy. 12 ships, well armed, moving through sector of space that are navigational charts logged as empty. No human settlements within 3 light hours. No active military presence detected in any direction. The convoy was carrying fuel cells and ground equipment to one of our forward supply positions. It had 2 escort vessels and a dedicated communications officer who reported in every 6 hours on a secured frequency. At the 4th check-in window, there was no report. We sent a query. No response. We sent a second query on a backup frequency. Still nothing. We dispatched a reconnaissance vessel to the convoy's last logged position. The vessel arrived, scanned the area, and reported back within the hour. There was nothing there. No wreckage. No debris field. No distress signals. The convoy was simply gone, as if it had never existed. The search team we sent to do a wider sweep never reported back either. I was sitting at my console reviewing a routine logistics summary when that second silence landed. I stopped reading the logistics report. I sat very still for a long time. In my experience, ships disappear because of catastrophic accidents, hostile action, or navigation failures. All 3 of those scenarios leave something behind. There is always evidence. There is always debris or a radiation signature or a distress signal or a body. There was nothing. The void had simply swallowed 20 ships and closed over them without a ripple. I opened a new document and began writing. Not a report this time, a personal analysis. A private attempt to think through what I was seeing and what it might mean. I wrote at the top, what is doing this? And why can we not see it? Over the next 11 days, the disappearances continued. A forward command relay was found, destroyed on a planet with no recorded human presence. The destruction was precise. The main tower was down. The backup systems were down. The cooling infrastructure was down. Everything that made the relay functional was gone. But the living quarters attached to the facility were untouched. Every personal item the crew had left behind was undisturbed. Whatever had come through that facility had known exactly what it was looking for. Then our communication encryption started failing. Not dramatically. Not all at once. Specific channels began producing interference at predictable times. Operational orders that went out in the morning sometimes seemed to be expected by the humans by the afternoon. Ambushes that we had planned with minimal advance notice failed because the humans were not where they were supposed to be, and we were not where we were supposed to be undetected. The shape of our operational information was leaking in ways our signals team could not explain. Senior Signal Officer Krevoth spent 4 days analyzing the compromised channels and came to me looking like he had not slept in any of those 4 days. He said, something is inside the network. Not breaking in, it is already inside. Passively. It does not send or retrieve large data packets. It reads. It observes. It has been doing this for what I estimate is several months. I asked how that was possible given the encryption protocols. He said, I believe someone was physically inside our hardware. Not remotely. In person. They were in the server rooms at some point. They touched the actual machines. I asked which server rooms. He listed 4 locations. 3 of them were on ships. One was in a ground facility on a planet that we had held without contest for 4 months. A planet with no recorded human population. I sat alone in my office that night and thought about what it takes to get inside an enemy server room. You have to get to the planet. You have to get through whatever security is between you and the facility. You have to find the right room access, the right machines, install whatever you have installed, and then get out again. And you have to do all of this without being seen, because if you are seen, the mission is over. And yet someone had done it 4 times on secured Dominion assets, quietly, completely, without leaving a trace. Then came the general. His name was Senior Commander Fevmerk, and he was one of the most effective officers in the Dominion ground forces. He commanded a battle group of nearly 40,000 soldiers from a hardened bunker on a world we had fully secured, no active human presence, extensive perimeter monitoring, a personal security detail of 40 guards rotating in overlapping shifts. Access to his command center required 3 separate biometric clearances. They found him at his desk on a morning when his first security shift arrived for the daily briefing. He had not been hurt. There was no sign of forced entry anywhere in the facility. The perimeter monitors showed nothing unusual during the entire previous night. The security logs showed no unauthorized access at any checkpoint. On his desk was a folded piece of paper. Human-made, human writing. The translation officer handled it within minutes of discovery and brought the result directly to me, because by this point everyone in the command structure had started bringing unexplained human-related incidents to my desk. The note said, "We were here 3 weeks ago. We wanted you to know." I read it 4 times. I set it down. I picked it up and read it again. 3 weeks ago. They had been inside that bunker 3 weeks ago, and they had waited until now to leave a message. Not because they could not have left it earlier, because they wanted us to know that they had been watching for 3 weeks before they chose to reveal themselves. They wanted us to understand the gap between what they could have done and what they chose to do. They wanted us to sit with that gap and feel its shape. I felt its shape. It was enormous. I went into the historical archives that evening, the human accessible records, the cleaned and published histories, and I searched for every reference to their special operations forces. What I found was a collection of accounts that read individually like remarkable stories of individual courage or clever tactics. Taken together, they formed a pattern I had missed entirely. These forces did not appear at the beginning of conflicts. They appeared after the conflict had already developed, after the regular forces had established the shape of the war, defined the front lines, and identified the problems that conventional approaches could not solve. Then and only then, these particular units were deployed, not to fight the war but to change its conditions, to remove a capability or a commander or a piece of infrastructure that, without their intervention, could not be reached. They did not win battles. They changed what battles were possible. I went back to the first intercepted message from Kepler's reach. Special Operations Forces are not authorized at this time. I had read that as meaning not needed. Yet, I now understood it differently. It meant the situation has not yet reached the threshold that justifies their deployment. Regular forces are sufficient for this phase. We are watching. When the right moment comes, we will send them. The war had been running for 19 months. Our advance had slowed. Our supply lines were degrading. Our communication security was compromised. Our senior commander had received a note on his desk from people who had been invisible inside his most secure facility for 3 weeks. The threshold had apparently been reached. I wrote what I considered to be my most important report that night. I said everything I have just described to you. I laid it out clearly, with evidence, with the timeline, with the pattern. I ended it with a sentence that I chose very carefully. I wrote, "We have not yet engaged the soldiers that humans consider exceptional. Everything we have fought until this point, the defenders of Kepler's Reach, the garrison at Tharsis Ridge, every ground unit and fleet element we have faced, those are their ordinary soldiers, their standard, their average. I am not able to model with any confidence what comes next. I am formally recommending that we seek to open ceasefire negotiations before the situation changes further." The Council's response came within 6 hours. It said, "Analyst Val Careth has demonstrated signs of significant stress and diminished analytical objectivity. He is hereby reassigned to rear echelon advisory duties pending a full psychological evaluation. His report has been received and filed. The advance continues as planned." I packed my materials into a carry case and moved to the rear. I was angry for a time. Then I was frightened. And then, when the real news started arriving, I was something much quieter than either of those things. I was waiting, because I already knew what was coming. I just did not know where it would land. First, it landed everywhere and almost all at once. I am going to tell you about an operation. I am going to tell you about it the way I pieced it together afterward from interviews and security logs and forensic analysis reports, because I was not there and no one who was there saw all of it. What I can tell you is the result. The Dominion Fleet Coordination Array on Velsur Prime, a structure the size of a small city, hardened against orbital bombardment, protected by 300 m of reinforced casing, defended by 400 elite guards, and backed by redundant security systems that had never in their operational history produced a single false alarm stopped working. It did not malfunction. It was destroyed from the inside. And we had no idea it was happening until it was already done. 6 people did it. Let me tell you how I know it was 6. A commercial cargo freighter named the Alcott registered at Velsur Prime's orbital station 7 weeks before the array went dark. It carried a legitimate cargo manifest, a crew of 6, and documentation that passed every check our station security ran. The crew came aboard. They loaded a consignment of agricultural equipment. They went through biometric screening at 3 separate checkpoints. They departed 14 hours after arrival. Logs clean, nothing flagged. At some point during those 14 hours, 6 people who were not the Alcott's crew did not leave with the ship. I know this because the forensic team found evidence of occupancy in a maintenance crawl space running along the lower level of the station's eastern docking arm. The space was 1 and 1/2 m high, about 60 cm wide, and ran for roughly 400 m. Before connecting to the station's service infrastructure, which connected to the array's lower access points. It was not a comfortable space. It was not a space anyone was meant to occupy for extended periods. There were no lights in it, no temperature regulation, and no room to stand. The 6 people who had entered it stayed there for 18 days. Our forensic team found the wrappers from compressed ration packs counted and sorted. They found evidence of a sleeping rotation, though how exactly 6 people slept in shift in a 60 cm wide passage without making sounds that triggered the acoustic sensors in the adjacent corridor, our technical analysts could not fully explain. They found a strip of cloth that had been used as a bandage, tied and retied multiple times. Someone had been injured at some point during those 18 days and had dealt with it quietly and continued. After 18 days they moved. I reconstructed the path they took from the security camera logs, which is a strange thing to say because the cameras showed nothing. What I mean is that I reconstructed their path from the cameras that malfunctioned, or that went briefly offline, or that simply showed an empty corridor for longer than the motion detection logs suggested should have been the case. I built the route from the gaps, 400 m of crawl space, 3 access hatches, 2 maintenance corridors, 1 service elevator that technically required a command-level access code, but apparently did not require one that night. They entered the array's lower service level at approximately 2:00 in the morning station time. The array was staffed overnight by a security rotation of 40 guards on the lower levels, with the heavier complement on the upper operational floor and the main access points. The 40 lower-level guards had their shift assignment, their patrol routes, their check-in windows with the central station. All 40 of them completed their shifts without incident. None of them raised an alarm. Only 3 of them, when interviewed afterward by our investigation team, had any unusual experience to report. One said he had felt briefly that he was not alone in the junction between Corridor 7 and the service bay, but when he turned around the corridor was empty. Another said the lights in the equipment room he was responsible for had flickered twice during his patrol, which had never happened before. The third said only that the night had felt longer than usual, which he attributed to low staffing in the break room and a poor night's sleep the previous evening. That was it. 40 guards. And that was the full sum of their unusual experiences. The array itself was the target, not the people, not the facility. The array. The 6 operators spent, by our best estimate, 4 hours inside the lower service level before reaching the 3 main power routing junctions. Those junctions fed everything: the coordination systems, the backup coordination systems, the emergency backup coordination systems, and the remote failover connection to the secondary array in orbit. They were not merely the heart of the system. They were every redundancy built to protect the heart. The 6 operators did not bring explosives. They did not need to. What they brought was a technical understanding of the array's architecture. so precise that they were able to use the system's own components to cause the failure that our engineering team, looking at the aftermath initially, refused to believe was deliberate. They thought it was an equipment malfunction, an incredibly unlikely combination of simultaneous equipment failures, but a malfunction. It took our lead engineer 2 days of analysis to conclude that no malfunction produces that specific pattern. It had to be intentional. It had to be done by people who understood the machine better than the people who built it. The array went dark at 6:22 in the morning. By 6:25, every fleet group that depended on it for coordination was operating blind. By 6:30, 3 of our battle groups, navigating on independent systems that were no longer synchronized, began moving on overlapping courses. The collision alert protocols failed. Because the collision alert protocols ran through the array, 2 ships made contact. One was destroyed. The other was disabled. The resulting debris field disrupted navigation for a sector-wide radius. And while all of this was happening, at 6:23 in the morning, a human ship that had no business being in Dominion-controlled space appeared in the airspace above Vel Essor Prime. It was in atmosphere for exactly 40 seconds. It recovered something or someone from a location on the surface, well away from any Dominion installation. And then it was gone. 40 seconds. I want you to understand what kind of planning produces a 40-second extraction. You have to know the patrol schedules of every ship in the area. You have to know the timing of the array's failure well enough that you can calculate the window of sensor disruption it will cause. You have to have a team on the ground who can reach the extraction point in the right window after completing their objective on schedule. You have to have a pilot willing to bring a ship into enemy-controlled airspace and atmosphere at exactly the right moment on the assumption that everything has gone correctly. Every piece of that plan had to work, all of it in sequence with no margin for delay. The forensic team filed their report 3 weeks after the event. I read it in my rear echelon office, where I had been sitting with very little to do. At the end of the report, listed as a minor addendum, was a note from the investigator who had processed the crawl space where the team had lived for 18 days. She had found something on the wall, not scratched in with a tool, written carefully in ink using a small marker. 6 names in human script. Below the names, a date, the day they had entered the crawl space. And below the date, 6 words. See you on the other side. I read that note in my office and I sat with it for a long time. 6 people had written their names on a wall in a dark, narrow space where no one was ever supposed to look, and they had said goodbye to themselves or to each other or to whatever version of this world exists before a thing is done, and then they had gone out and done it. Without the array, our fleet coordination collapsed. Without fleet coordination, our battle groups could not synchronize. Without synchronization, 3 months of careful operational planning came apart in a matter of hours. And the human regular army, those same soldiers who had held Tharsis Ridge, who had charged our formation with a single frigate, who had refused to accept terms they could not accept without abandoning the people they had come to protect. Those soldiers stopped defending and went forward. The advance that Harvaline had been so proud of reversed in 6 weeks. 6 weeks. After 19 months of struggle, 6 weeks. I thought about that a great deal in the weeks that followed. 6 people had moved the whole weight of a 19-month war by removing the one thing that could not be replaced by any other means. The regular army had bought 19 months of time. 6 operators had spent that time like a currency, and they had bought something irreplaceable with it. I never found out whether all 6 of them made it back. The human records are not specific, and when I later had the opportunity to ask, I received polite deflections. I have chosen since then to believe they all survived. It may not be accurate, but it is the belief I can live with. And at my age, that is a valid criteria for choosing what to believe. It has been 4 years since the armistice was signed in the conference hall on a neutral station between human and Dominion space. I am writing this final assessment not because the council asked me to, though they did ask, but because I believe it is the most important document I will produce in my career, and I intend to produce it correctly. This is what I know now that I did not know before the war. Humanity's regular armed forces are built on a foundation that most galactic species have never attempted to construct: the deliberate cultivation of voluntary sacrifice. Every soldier who serves in their military has chosen to be there. Not compelled, not conscripted, not economically maneuvered into a corner. Chosen with full knowledge of what service means. They know they may be asked to do things that are dangerous. They accept this in advance, and having accepted it, they do not revisit the decision when the situation becomes hard. This produces soldiers with a quality I spent years cataloging as stubbornness, and have since recategorized as something much more precise: commitment, made in advance so that in the moment itself there is nothing to decide. The soldiers at Tharsis Ridge did not make a choice in any moment of that 68-hour defense to keep going. They had already made that choice. They were simply living inside decision that was already finished. That is a significant advantage. It is not one I expected. Their special operations forces are something built on top of this foundation, refined further, shaped by selection process. I have spent considerable effort researching. The humans have many of these units. They have different names, different histories, different areas of specialization, but they share certain characteristics that I believe explain what happened at Vel Iskar Prime. The first characteristic is patience. Not the patience of waiting for something to happen, but the patience of choosing not to act until the precise moment when action will matter most. The operators who spent 18 days in that crawl space did not move early because moving early would have been easier. They waited until their timing was exact. They understood that the discomfort of waiting was a price worth paying for the precision of outcome. The second characteristic is what I can only describe as clarity of purpose. In the Dominion military, as in the militaries of most species I have studied, soldiers fight for a combination of loyalty to their government, self-preservation, and whatever ideological framework their training has installed. This mixture is complicated. Under pressure, the components can conflict. When self-preservation is in tension with loyalty, soldiers sometimes choose self-preservation. When ideology conflicts with reality, Soldiers sometimes update their ideology. Human special operators do not seem to experience this conflict in the same way. They fight for the people beside them, and for the people they have been sent to protect. Full stop. The mission exists to serve those people, and they serve the mission. There is no internal negotiation. When Sergeant Major Danny Voss flew the Caraway into our formation, she had resolved any personal conflict in advance. Her crew had resolved it. The math was already done. The third characteristic is invisibility, not a technology, not a device, but a discipline. They are trained to be unnoticed, not merely quiet, not merely small, genuinely, comprehensively unnoticed. The guards at Vel Eskar Prime were not incompetent. They were well-trained, alert, and professional. And yet 6 humans lived within their perimeter for 18 days and walked among their security systems for 4 hours and left without a single confirmed detection. This is not luck. This is a skill developed over years of the most demanding training any species in the galactic record has applied to its soldiers. I have read their training records, the parts that are not classified. I am told the classified parts are more demanding than the parts one was permitted to read. I believe this. Now I want to tell you about the day the human delegation arrived for the armistice talks, because it is the moment that completed my understanding of everything I had observed. They arrived on a civilian transport, clean, unassuming, appropriately dressed for a diplomatic occasion. There were 11 of them, 6 diplomats, 3 aides, 2 communication staff. They came through the docking bay and into the conference wing with the ease of people who had done this before, or who were very good at pretending they had. The lead negotiator was a woman named Helen Grant. She was mid-50s, precise in her language, generous with her patience. During disagreements, she had a habit of listening to an entire argument before responding, which made her very difficult to talk past. The Dominion delegation found her frustrating in the way that all diplomats find someone frustrating when that person simply refuses to be maneuvered. I observed the talks in an advisory capacity. I had no authority in the proceedings. I was there because the council wanted an analyst present and had realized, somewhat late, that I was the one person in their service who actually understood what they were negotiating with. On the 3rd day, during a recess, I was standing near the corridor that led back to the delegation's waiting area. Helen Grant and her aide were walking past. They were speaking quietly, and I was positioned close enough to hear, and I spoke enough of their language by then to understand without a translation delay. Her aide, a young man named Owen Clark, was speaking into a communication device. Helen Grant paused, listened to whatever Owen was relaying, and then said, quietly, in the flat, matter-of-fact tone of someone confirming a logistical detail, good. Send word to the forward element. Tell them to hold position. If we get a signature today, they stand down. If we don't get a signature today, they'll know what to do. Owen nodded. Helen Grant adjusted her jacket, looked up, met my eyes briefly, and smiled in the entirely normal way of someone who has been caught doing nothing interesting whatsoever. Then she walked back into the conference room. I stood in that corridor for quite a while after she had gone. A forward element, positioned somewhere, waiting, holding, ready to act if the talks collapsed. Not deployed as a threat. Not announced, not displayed, not used. As leverage. Simply present. A silent insurance policy written in the language of 6-person teams and 40-second extraction windows and notes. On the walls of crawl spaces. I did not know where they were. I did not try to find out. I made a deliberate choice in that corridor to file the information under. Confirmed and irrelevant because the talks were going to succeed, I was certain of that, and because even if I found the forward element's position, I did not want to know the answer to the question that would immediately follow. How long had they been there? The armistice was signed that afternoon. Helen Grant signed her name in clear, practiced letters and set the pen down, and shook hands with the Dominion lead negotiator with the particular warmth of someone who has just concluded a very difficult negotiation successfully and is genuinely glad it is over. Her delegation celebrated in a restrained way, the way of people for whom celebration is appropriate but excess is not. I wrote my final report that evening. I wrote about everything in these pages. The Caraway Tharsis Ridge, the disappearing convoy, the general's note, the crawl space, the array, the 40-second window. I wrote about Helen Grant and Owen Clark, and the forward element that had been waiting somewhere, patient and ready and unseen. And then I wrote my recommendation. I told the council that humanity should be offered full membership in the Galactic Council. I told them that humanity should be offered an alliance, a genuine one with mutual defense obligations on both sides. I told them this not because I had grown sentimental about the species that had just defeated us, but because the strategic calculation was simple. Humanity with grievances is a variable that cannot be modeled with any confidence, and I had already made the mistake of modeling them with overconfidence once, and I was not willing to make that mistake again. I told them that what the galaxy had seen from humanity so far, the campaigns, the engagements, the special operations, all of it was humanity choosing to respond proportionally, to do what the situation required, and nothing beyond it. They had not pursued us into our home systems. They had not sought to end the Dominion. They had fought to make the war stop, not to determine what came after. This is a discipline. It is a choice, and it speaks well of them. But it is not a permanent commitment. It is the behavior of a species that has decided for now that restraint is in everyone's interest, including their own. That calculation can change, and a species capable of producing 6 people who will live in a maintenance crawl space for 18 days and then walk through a secured installation undetected, a species whose ordinary soldiers hold positions for 68 hours against 4-to-1 odds because the person beside them needs them to, a species whose pilots will fly a damaged ship into the center of an enemy formation because someone has to buy 11 minutes. That species should be on our side. It should always be on our side. The council approved the membership offer. The alliance was formalized the following year. Helen Grant attended the ceremony. She shook my hand at the reception afterward and said she had heard I was the one who had pushed for the alliance recommendation. She said she appreciated it. I told her I had simply done my job which was to analyze the situation accurately. She looked at me for a moment with an expression I had difficulty reading, and then she said, "You know, most people need a war to figure out when they've underestimated someone. I'm glad you figured it out before the second one started." She moved on to the next conversation, because she was a diplomat and there were always more conversations to have. I stood with my drink and thought about what she had said for a long time. I went home that night and opened my personal log, the one I have kept for 32 years, the one with my private notes and my quiet admissions of uncertainty. I turned to a new page. I wrote one entry. I spent 12 cycles studying humans and I was wrong about everything that mattered. I have decided, in whatever time remains to me, to be grateful for one thing. Specifically, they are the kind of people who accept a peace offer. That is not a small thing. That is in fact the only thing that ultimately mattered. I closed the log. I turned off the light. And for the first time in 4 years, I slept without the particular anxiety that comes from knowing something enormous is approaching that you cannot stop and cannot see. Whatever comes next, we are not their enemy. We are their neighbors. And I intend to spend the rest of my career making sure the distinction between those two things is something no analyst in this dominion ever has to relearn the hard way again. I have a feeling humans would appreciate that. I also have a feeling they would never entirely trust that the lesson had stuck. And honestly, given their history with us, that is entirely fair.